You think you can leave? You belong to the dark now." The phone screen cracked under the pressure of her thumb, a spiderweb of glass slicing into her skin. She didn't feel the cut. She only felt the fire in her side, the jagged, grinding agony every time she inhaled. She needed help. She needed out. With trembling fingers, she typed the plea into the darkness, aiming for a savior but hitting the devil instead. She didn't know that some wrong numbers are destiny in disguise, and she certainly didn't know that the man who would answer wasn't a hero. He was the one thing the monsters under her bed were afraid of. The sound of a human bone snapping is distinct. It does not sound like a dry twig breaking, as novels often suggest. It sounds wet, muffled, a dull pop that reverberates through the body like a bass drum kicked in an empty auditorium. Raven Fox heard the sound before she felt the pain. A split-second delay where her brain tried to process the impossible trajectory of her own body, hitting the marble kitchen island. Then, the pain arrived. A white-hot spear driven through her left side, stealing the breath from her lungs and replacing it with a suffocating, iron-tasting panic. "Look at what you made me do," Derek sighed. His voice wasn't angry. That was the terrifying part. It was disappointed, like a parent scolding a toddler for spilling juice on a white rug. He adjusted the cuffs of his uniform, the badge on his chest catching the harsh, artificial light of the penthouse chandelier. "I have a precinct dinner in an hour, Raven. I don't have time for your theatrics." Raven lay on the cold tiles, her vision swimming in sickening waves of gray and black. She tried to push herself up, but her left arm refused to cooperate, sending a fresh spasm of agony radiating from her ribcage. She stifled a scream, biting her lip until she tasted copper. "I didn't," she wheezed, the air whistling through her teeth. "I didn't take it." Derek walked over, his heavy police-issue boots thudding rhythmically against the floor. He squatted down, the leather of his holster creaking. He looked handsome in that terrifying, polished way, the kind of face that charmed juries and silenced witnesses. He reached out and tucked a strand of Raven's jet-black hair behind her ear. His fingers were cold. "It's $50,000, Raven. Seized evidence. It doesn't just walk out of a safe." Derek whispered, his eyes void of empathy. "I know about your brother's debts. I know you're trying to be the hero, but you're not a hero, darling. You're just a grifter I plucked out of the gutter." He stood up, checking his watch. "I'm going to shower. When I come out, you better have that money on the table, or the next thing that breaks won't be a rib, it'll be your neck." He turned and walked toward the master bathroom. A moment later, the heavy thrum of the shower pipes began to vibrate through the floor. Raven didn't cry. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford, a waste of hydration and energy. She dragged herself across the floor, inch by agonizing inch, toward the kitchen counter where her phone lay face down. The penthouse was stifling. The AC had broken 2 days ago, and the city heat wave had turned the apartment into a kiln. There was no rain to wash the city clean, only a thick, dry heat that pressed against the windows like a physical weight. The air smelled of stale orchids and Derek's expensive cologne, a scent that made her stomach churn. She reached the phone. Her fingers were shaking so badly she could barely grip the sleek metal. She needed help, not the police. Derek was the police. He was the golden boy of the 4th Precinct. Who would believe a former con artist over a decorated detective? No, she needed family. She needed Silas. Her brother was useless in a fight, but he had a car. He could get her out of the city. She unlocked the screen, her vision blurring as tears finally welled up, stung by the sweat dripping into her eyes. She pulled up the messaging app. Silas knew. She typed frantically, her thumb slipping on the glass. The pain in her side was becoming a roar, drowning out her thoughts. She didn't check the contact name. She just needed to type the words before Derek turned the water off. "He broke my ribs. I can't breathe. Please, I'm at the apartment. Come get me." She hit send. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the tile. Raven squeezed her eyes shut, trying to shallow her breathing to minimize the movement of her chest. "Just hold on," she told herself. "Silas will see it. He's always on his phone. He'll be here in 20 minutes. But as she lay there, listening to the water running, a terrifying thought clawed at her. She had recently deleted Silas's number to protect him from Derek's snooping. She had typed the number in manually. Had she typed the last digit right? It was a 5 or was it a 6? The phone buzzed against the tile. A reply. Fast. Too fast for Silas, who usually took 10 minutes to craft a witty response. Raven forced her eyes open and looked at the screen. The preview notification glowed in the dim light of the kitchen. Unknown number. Who is this? Her heart stopped. Wrong number. She had texted a stranger. Despair crashed over her, heavier than Derek's fist. It was over. No one was coming. She was going to die here, on this cold floor, surrounded by stainless steel appliances and the smell of expensive lies. But then the phone buzzed again, and again. Unknown number. Identify yourself. Unknown number. You said he broke your ribs? Raven stared at the messages. There was something demanding about the tone. It wasn't the concerned panic of a normal citizen. It was authoritative. Cold. She shouldn't answer. She should delete the thread and pray Derek didn't check her phone. But pain makes people do reckless things. And Raven Fox had been reckless her entire life. With trembling fingers, she typed back, "Wrong number. Forget it. He's a cop. No one can help." She watched the 3 dots appear instantly. They danced for a long time. Then, a single message appeared that changed the atmospheric pressure in the room. Unknown number? A cop? Give me the address. Raven hesitated. This person was crazy, or a prankster, or worse. Why? She typed. Unknown number. Because I hate cops. And I'm 5 minutes away. Ashton Blackthorne did not like interruptions. He sat in the back of the Viper Room, a dimly lit, velvet-draped office behind the city's most exclusive underground casino. The air here was kept rigorously cool, a stark contrast to the boiling city outside. It smelled of aged leather, gun oil, and the terrified sweat of the man tied to the chair in front of him. Ashton was a man of symmetry. His suit was a bespoke charcoal 3-piece that cost more than most people earned in a year. His tie was knotted with mathematical precision. His face was a mask of sharp angles and cold indifference, marred only by a thin, pale scar that ran through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a childhood he had long since buried. "I swear, Mr. Blackthorne," the man in the chair stammered, blood dripping from his nose onto his pristine white shirt. "I didn't know it was your shipment. I thought it was the triads." Ashton didn't blink. He swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, watching the light fracture through the bourbon. "Competence is a currency, Mr. Vane. You are bankrupt." Ashton reached for the heavy silver pistol on the desk. He wasn't going to kill Vane. Not yet. But he was going to make sure the man never touched a steering wheel again. Then his personal phone buzzed. Ashton paused. This phone, a matte black device with no branding, had a number known to exactly 3 people: his second-in-command, his hacker, and the Grim Reaper. He set the glass down and picked up the phone. A text from an unknown number. "He broke my ribs. I can't breathe. Please, I'm at the apartment. Come get me." Ashton stared at the screen. A wrong number. A mundane, pathetic tragedy unfolding somewhere in the city. A domestic dispute. It was beneath him. It was irrelevant. He should delete it and return to the business of breaking Mr. Vane's fingers. But something nagged at him. The number. He recognized the area code and the prefix. It was the same exchange as his safe house in the Heights. A building he owned. A building where he housed his most valuable assets. "Who is this?" he typed. The reply was evasive. "Wrong number." Ashton's eyes narrowed. He signaled to his bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Cale, to hold off on Vane. The silence in the room grew heavy. Then came the second message from the stranger. "He's a cop. No one can help." Ashton felt a cold smile tug at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. A cop, abusing a woman, in his territory. The police force in this city was a tangled mess of corruption, but there was an unspoken agreement. The badges stayed out of Blackthorne business, and the Blackthorns kept the body count in the shadows. But lately, the 4th Precinct had been getting greedy. They had raided 2 of his warehouses last week. "Cale," Ashton said softly. His voice was like crushing velvet. "Boss?" "Trace the signal, now." Cale pulled out a tablet. 30 seconds passed. The silence stretched, the only sound the whimpering of Mr. Vane. "It's close, boss," Cale said, frowning. "The Elysium Tower, Penthouse B." Ashton stood up. He knew that building. He owned the construction company that built it. He knew exactly which dirty cop lived in Penthouse B, Detective Derek Miller, the man who had been skimming off the top of Ashton's shipments for months. Ashton had been looking for a reason to pay Detective Miller a visit. He just hadn't expected the invitation to come from the man's victim. "Why?" the girl had asked. Ashton typed his reply. "Because I hate cops, and I'm 5 minutes away." He slid the phone into his pocket and finished his drink in one swallow. He walked over to Mr. Vane, who flinched. "It is your lucky day, Vane," Ashton said, buttoning his jacket. "I have a more pressing engagement. Get out of my city before sunrise. If I see you again, I'll take your eyes." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked out of the office, his movements fluid and predatory. "We taking the crew?" Cale asked, falling into step beside him as they moved through the crowded, noisy casino. "No," Ashton said, pushing open the heavy steel doors to the alleyway. The heat of the night hit them instantly, a dry, dusty blast that tasted of asphalt and ozone. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes, turning them into pools of obsidian. "Just us. I want to look this man in the eye when I take what's his." "You want to save the girl?" Kyle asked, opening the door to the armored black SUV waiting at the curb. Ashton paused, his hand on the door frame. He looked at the skyscraper looming in the distance, a needle of glass piercing the smog-choked sky. He didn't care about damsels in distress. He didn't do charity. "I don't save people, Cale," Ashton said, his voice devoid of warmth. "I acquire them." The shower stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Raven scrambled, gasping through the pain, and shoved her phone under the refrigerator. She couldn't let him find it. If he saw the messages, if he saw she had invited a stranger to his home, he would kill her. Not metaphorically. He would put a bullet in her and call it a break-in gone wrong. She barely managed to drag herself back to the spot where she had fallen before the bathroom door opened. Steam billowed out, carrying the scent of sandalwood soap. Derek emerged, a towel wrapped around his waist. His skin was pink from the heat, his wet hair slicked back. He looked like a statue of a Greek god, if Greek gods beat women for sport. "Still on the floor?" he asked, stepping over her legs to get to the fridge. He opened it, grabbing a bottle of sparkling water. The light from the fridge cast a long, distorted shadow over Raven. "I thought I told you to get the money." "I told you," Raven whispered, clutching her side. "I don't have it. Someone else took it. The evidence locker log was forged." Derek slammed the fridge door. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. He crouched down, grabbing Raven by the chin, his fingers digging into her jaw. "Do you take me for a fool, Raven? You're a thief. That's what you do. You steal. You stole my heart, and now you steal my retirement fund." He squeezed harder. "Where is it?" "I don't know," she screamed, the cry turning into a cough that rattled her broken ribs. Derek raised his hand. Raven flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for the impact. Ding-dong. The doorbell chimed. It was a cheerful, melodious sound that had no business existing in this moment of horror. Derek froze. His hand hovered in the air. He frowned, glancing at the front door. "Who the hell is that?" He stood up, his demeanor shifting instantly from abuser to cop. "Stay here. If you make a sound, I will finish what I started." He walked to the foyer, peering through the peephole. Raven watched from the kitchen floor, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. 5 minutes, the text had said. It had only been 3. "Who is it?" Derek called out, his hand instinctively moving to where his gun usually sat on his hip, realizing too late he was only wearing a towel. "Delivery," a muffled voice said. "I didn't order anything. Go away." "Signature required, Detective Miller. It's from the district attorney." Derek hesitated. "The DA." That got his attention. He cursed under his breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and swung the door open. "Make it quick, The door exploded inward. It wasn't a kick. It was a battering ram of human force. The heavy oak door slammed into Derek's face, sending him reeling back, blood instantly spurting from his nose. He crashed into the foyer table, shattering a vase. Raven gasped, pulling herself up against the cabinets. A man stepped into the apartment. He was tall, dangerously tall. He wore a suit that cost more than the apartment, tailored to fit broad shoulders that blocked out the hallway light. He didn't look frantic. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like he was walking into a business meeting he had already won. Behind him, a second man, larger, wider, stepped in and closed the damaged door, leaning against it with crossed arms. The man in the suit walked into the living room, his polished shoes making no sound on the hardwood. He looked at Derek, who was scrambling to get up, clutching his bleeding nose, his towel slipping. "Who the hell are you?" Derek roared, eyes watering. "I'm a police officer. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The intruder tilted his head. He looked bored. He scanned the room, his dark eyes passing over the luxury furniture, the view of the city, and finally landing on Raven. Raven stopped breathing. His gaze was physical. It felt like being scanned by a predatory laser. He looked at her bruising face, her clutching arm, the way she was curled on the floor. His expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened into something brittle and sharp. "You must be the wrong number," he said. His voice was deep, a baritone that vibrated in Raven's chest. Derek scrambled for the handgun he had left on the kitchen counter near Raven. "I said freeze! I'll blow your head off!" Derek lunged for the gun. The man in the suit moved. It was a blur of motion too fast to track. One moment he was standing in the center of the room. The next, he was intercepting Derek. He didn't punch him. He caught Derek's wrist mid-reach, twisting it with a sickening crack that echoed the sound of Raven's ribs earlier. Derek screamed, dropping to his knees. The man kicked Derek in the chest. Casual, efficient, sending the detective sliding across the kitchen floor until he hit the cabinets. The stranger picked up the gun. He ejected the magazine, let it clatter to the floor, and then racked the slide to eject the chambered round. He tossed the empty weapon onto the sofa. "Detective Miller," the man said, adjusting his cufflinks, "you have been skimming from my shipments. I was willing to overlook it as the cost of doing business, but—" He walked over to where Raven sat trembling. He towered over her. He smelled of expensive bourbon, gunpowder, and ice. "I have a strict policy regarding damaged goods." Raven looked up at him, terrified. "Who are you?" He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, but his eyes were ancient and weary. He looked at her ribs, then back at her eyes. "I'm the consequences," he said. He reached out. Raven flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, his hand, large, warm, calloused, slid behind her knees and her back. He lifted her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing more than a rag doll. The movement sent a spike of pain through her side, and she cried out, grabbing his lapel. "Breathe shallow," he commanded, his voice close to her ear. "The pain means you're still alive." "Put her down," Derek wheezed from the floor, holding his broken wrist. "You can't take her. That's kidnapping. I'll have the entire force on you." The man paused. He turned slowly to look at Derek. "You can try, detective, but you should know. My lawyers are more expensive than your precinct's entire annual budget, and my patience is significantly shorter." He looked at the large man by the door. "Cale, leave a card, and ensure the detective understands the new arrangement." "Understood, boss." Cale cracked his knuckles, a grin spreading across his face. The man in the suit carried Raven toward the door. As they passed the threshold, Raven looked back. She saw Cale advancing on Derek. She saw the fear in Derek's eyes, the same fear she had lived with for 2 years. Then, the door closed, shutting out the sight. They moved down the hallway toward the elevator. Raven's head rested against the stranger's chest. She could hear his heart beating, slow, steady, rhythmic. A machine masked as a man. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered, her strength fading as the adrenaline crash hit her. The elevator doors slid open. He stepped inside and pressed the button for the garage. "Away from him," Ashton Blackthorne said, looking straight ahead at his own reflection in the metal doors. "You asked for help, little bird. Now you have to live with the reply." Raven realized then, as the elevator began its smooth descent, that she hadn't been saved. She had been traded. And as she looked up at the sharp jawline of the Mafia Boss holding her, she wondered if the price of this rescue was going to be her soul. Consciousness returned to Raven not as a flood, but as a slow, rhythmic tide. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like Derek's apartment, stale cologne and fear. It smelled of crisp linen, antiseptic, and something faintly smoky, like burnt oak. She opened her eyes. The ceiling was high, adorned with crown molding that looked older than her entire family lineage. She shifted, instinctively bracing for the agony in her ribs, but it was duller now. A distant throb wrapped in a haze of painkillers. She looked down. She was wearing a silk shirt, men's, oversized charcoal gray. Her side was heavily bandaged. "You're awake." The voice came from the corner of the room. Raven bolted upright, a gasp catching in her throat as the movement pulled at her injuries. Ashton Blackthorne sat in a wingback chair near the heavy velvet curtains. He was reading a file, a pair of reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, a domestic detail that made him look deceptively harmless. He closed the folder and set it on a small mahogany table. "Where am I?" Raven asked, her voice raspy. She looked around for an exit. There was one door, heavy oak, likely locked. "My estate," Ashton said, standing up. He moved with that same fluid, predatory grace she remembered from the night before. "Technically, you are in the guest wing. Practically, you are in the most secure fortress on the East Coast." He stopped at the foot of the bed. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket now, just a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle and inked with faint, intricate tattoos. "The doctor set your ribs. 2 fractures. Extensive bruising. You also had dehydration and signs of long-term stress." His eyes, dark and unreadable, bore into hers. Detective Miller was thorough. Raven pulled the silk sheet up to her chin. "Why did you bring me here? You could have just dropped me at a hospital." "A hospital would have reported your injuries to the police," Ashton replied, calm. "The police report would have gone to the 4th precinct, and within an hour, Detective Miller would have been at your bedside to finish the job." He walked to a side table and poured a glass of water, offering it to her. Raven hesitated, then took it. Her hands shook as she drank. "So what am I?" she asked, lowering the glass. "A prisoner?" "A guest," Ashton corrected. "For now." He leaned against the bedpost, crossing his arms. "I looked into your file, Raven Fox, or should I say Raven New. Petty theft, fraud, forgery. You have quite a colorful resume before you met the good detective." Raven stiffened. "That was a long time ago. I was surviving." "And what were you doing last night?" Ashton asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Miller claimed you stole $50,000. Did you?" "No," Raven said immediately, meeting his gaze. "He's dirty. He skims cash from drug busts. He thought I took a cut because I needed money for my brother's gambling debts. But I didn't touch it. He needed someone to blame because the money is missing. He probably spent it and forgot, or lost it himself." Ashton studied her face. He was a human lie detector, a man who built an empire on reading bluffs. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also a defiant spark of truth. "I believe you," Ashton said finally. Raven blinked, surprised. "You do?" "Yes, because if you had stolen $50,000 from a dirty cop, you would have been halfway to Mexico, not bleeding out on a kitchen floor texting random numbers." He pushed off the bedpost. "Rest. You'll need your strength." "For what?" Ashton paused at the door. He looked back, and for a second the mask slipped. He looked almost amused. "Because, little bird, you owe me a debt now. I saved your life. And in my world, nothing is free." The door clicked shut, the lock sliding home with a sound that was final. Raven sank back into the pillows. She was safe from Derek. Yes. But she had the distinct feeling she had just walked out of a wolf's den and into a dragon's lair. 2 days passed. Raven spent them in the room, which she discovered was larger than her entire childhood home. She was fed gourmet meals by silent staff members who avoided eye contact. A doctor came twice a day to check her ribs. She tried the door. Locked. She checked the windows. Reinforced glass. 3 stories up, overlooking a manicured garden patrolled by men with earpieces. She was pacing the floor on the 3rd evening, ignoring the ache in her side, when the door opened. It wasn't the maid, it was Ashton. He looked tired. There was a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was holding a tablet. "Get dressed," he said, tossing a garment bag onto the bed. "We have dinner." Raven stared at the bag. "I'm not hungry." "It wasn't a request," Ashton said, walking to the window and looking out at the twilight. The sky was a bruised purple, the heat of the day lingering over the estate. "We have a situation, and you are involved." Raven opened the bag. Inside was a sleek black dress, simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a high neck that would hide her bruises. "What situation?" she asked, moving behind a changing screen. "Detective Miller," Ashton said, his back to her. "He has been busy. He didn't report you missing. Instead, he issued a warrant for your arrest." Raven froze, the dress halfway over her head. "What? For what?" "Attempted murder," Ashton said calmly. "He claims you shot him with his own service weapon and fled with the evidence money. He has photos of his own injuries I gave him, as proof." Raven stepped out from behind the screen, the dress clinging to her frame. She looked pale, her dark hair stark against her skin. "He's framing me. He's going to kill me if the cops find me." Ashton turned. His gaze swept over her, lingering for a fraction of a second on the way the dress fit before returning to her eyes. "Correct, which is why you're going to stay right here." He walked to her, stopping inches away, He smelled of cigars and danger. But this creates a problem for me, Raven. I don't harbor fugitives. It's bad for business. It brings heat. The police are already sniffing around my operations because of Miller. So turn me in, Raven challenged, though her voice trembled. Ashton stepped closer, invading her personal space. He reached out, his hand hovering near her waist, careful not to touch her ribs. I have a better idea, he murmured. Miller is a nuisance. He's a loose thread in a tapestry I have been weaving for years. You know his habits. You know where he hides his ledger. You know his passwords. Raven's breath hitched. I know where he keeps a safe key. In a hollowed-out book in the study. Ashton smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful thing. Good. Then we are going to burn him down. You are going to help me destroy his career, his reputation, and his life. And in exchange, I will give you the one thing you've never had. What's that? Raven whispered. Freedom, Ashton said. Real freedom, no debts, no running. He offered her his arm. But first we eat. I don't plan revolutions on an empty stomach. Raven looked at his arm. She looked at the man who had broken into a penthouse to save a stranger. She realized then that Ashton Blackthorne wasn't a hero. He was a businessman, and she had just become his partner. She took his arm. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 30 people. They sat at one end, the long expanse of polished wood stretching out into the shadows. The atmosphere was tense. Ashton ate with precision, slicing his steak as if performing surgery. Raven picked at her food, her mind racing. My brother, she said suddenly. Silas, if Derek is looking for me, he'll go after Silas. Ashton didn't look up. Silas is safe. My men picked him up an hour ago. He is currently in the guest house, complaining about the lack of a reliable Wi-Fi signal for his gaming console. Raven dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. You kidnapped my brother? I secured your leverage, Ashton corrected, finally looking at her. He took a sip of red wine. You care about him. Miller knows that. It was the first place he would look. You should be thanking me. Thank you, Raven said, the words tasting bitter. But you can't just move people around like chess pieces. I can, and I do. Ashton leaned back. That is why I am alive, and why you are not in a prison cell. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the dining room burst open. Cale strode in, his face grim. He was holding a phone. Boss, we have a problem. Ashton didn't flinch. I am eating, Cale. It's the police. They're at the gate. Raven's blood ran cold. She gripped the edge of the table. He found me. Ashton's eyes narrowed. Miller! No, Cale said. SWAT. They have a warrant to search the premises. Someone tipped them off that the cop shooter is hiding here. Ashton stood up slowly. He adjusted his cuffs. The air in the room shifted instantly. The sophisticated host vanished, replaced by the warlord. They cannot enter without my permission. Unless they want to start a war, they cannot afford, Ashton said, his voice low. They have a thermal read, boss, Cale said urgently. They know we have extra heat signatures in the house. Ashton looked at Raven. For the first time, she saw a flicker of calculation that wasn't purely selfish. He looked at her bandaged side, her terrified eyes. Get her to the safe room, Ashton ordered. The one in the cellar. Do not come out until I come for you myself. What about you? Raven asked, standing up, ignoring the pain. I will go and greet our guests, Ashton said, buttoning his jacket. He walked over to her. He raised a hand and, with surprising gentleness, brushed his thumb over her cheekbone. Do not make a sound, Raven. If they find you, I cannot stop them from taking you into custody. And if you go into custody tonight, you won't survive the holding cell. Ashton, she whispered. It was the first time she had used his name. He paused. Be careful, she said. A corner of his mouth quirked up. I'm never careful, little bird. I'm just better than they are. He turned and walked toward the chaos, leaving Raven with Cale. Come on, miss, Cale said, ushering her toward a hidden panel in the wall. We gotta move. As Raven stepped into the darkness of the secret passage, she heard the distant wail of sirens growing louder. The sanctuary had been breached. The war had come to the doorstep. And she was the cause. She huddled in the dark, cold safe room, listening to the muffled sounds of shouting and heavy boots on the floorboards above. She realized with a sinking heart that she didn't want Ashton to get hurt. Not just because he was her protector, but because, in the strange, violent orbit of his life, she had found the first person who actually looked at her and saw her. Not just a useful object, but as the hours ticked by in the silence of the vault, a new fear took root. What if Ashton didn't come back? What if the consequences he spoke of had finally caught up to him? And then, the lock on the safe room door clicked. Raven held her breath, grabbing a heavy metal flashlight from the shelf, ready to swing. The door creaked open. A figure stood in the shadows. Raven! It wasn't Ashton's voice, it was Silas. "Silas?" she gasped, lowering the weapon. "What are you doing? Where is Ashton?" Silas stepped into the light, looking pale and shaky. "I don't know. The police took him. They cuffed him, Raven. They took him away." Raven's world tilted. Ashton Blackthorne, the untouchable king of the city, had been arrested. Because of her. "We have to go," Silas urged, grabbing her arm. "Cale said the back perimeter is clear. We have to run." Raven pulled her arm back. Her ribs throbbed, but her heart hammered a furious rhythm against them. "No," she said, her voice hard. "What, Raven, are you crazy? We have an out." Raven looked at the open door, then back at her brother. She thought of Derek's smug face. She thought of Ashton's hand on her cheek. "I'm not running anymore, Silas," she said, walking past him toward the stairs. "He got arrested protecting me. I'm going to get him out." "How?" Silas cried. "You're a con artist, not a lawyer." Raven stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She turned back, and in the dim light, her eyes were cold, sharp, and dangerous. She looked at her from who had spent too much time around wolves and learned how to bite. "Exactly," she said. "The law can't save him, but a lie might. The city at 3 a.m. was a beast that never truly slept, only dozed with one eye open." Raven Fox sat in the passenger seat of Silas's beat-up Honda Civic, the engine idling nervously 2 blocks away from the Elysium Tower. Her ribs were a dull, throbbing fire, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins acted as a potent anesthetic. She checked the Glock 19 in her lap, one she had taken from Cale's stash in the panic room. She didn't know how to shoot it well, but she knew how to point it, and tonight, that had to be enough. "This is suicide," Silas hissed, typing furiously on his laptop. The screen's blue glow illuminated his terrified face. "We are breaking into a crime scene, Raven. A crime scene owned by a dirty cop who currently has the city's most dangerous crime lord in handcuffs." "We aren't breaking in," Raven corrected, pulling her hair back into a severe bun. She applied a coat of dark red lipstick, watching her reflection in the rearview mirror. The frightened girl who had texted a wrong number was gone. In her place was the woman who had survived the streets for years. "We're retrieving lost property." "The security system is updated," Silas muttered. "But, okay, I'm in. I've looped the camera feed for the hallway on the 40th floor. You have exactly 10 minutes before the loop resets and the glitch becomes obvious. 10 minutes is plenty." Raven opened the car door. The humid night air hit her. She wasn't wearing the silk dress anymore. She wore black cargo pants and a fitted tactical top she'd found in the safe room, gear meant for Ashton's soldiers, now repurposed for his savior. She slipped into the building through the service entrance, using an access card she had swiped from Derek's wallet weeks ago. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow. Every ding of the bell felt like a judge's gavel. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, silence greeted her. The yellow police tape across Penthouse B's door was a stark warning. "Do not cross." Raven crossed it. She picked the lock with muscle memory, her hand steady despite the chaos in her heart. The door clicked open. The apartment smelled of stale violence. The shattered vase was still on the floor. The bloodstain on the carpet where Derek had fallen was dark and crusted. Raven stepped over it, moving straight for the study. She knew Derek Miller. She knew he was arrogant. He believed he was untouchable, so he hid his sins in plain sight. She reached the bookshelf. The Great Gatsby, a first edition. Derek never read. He just collected things that made him look sophisticated. She pulled the book down and opened the cover, hollowed out. Inside lay a small silver flash drive and a black notebook. Raven grabbed them. This was it. The ledger. The names, the dates, the payoffs. The proof that Derek Miller wasn't just a bad boyfriend. He was the head of a criminal distribution ring operating out of the precinct. Suddenly, the front door beeped. Raven froze. Silas's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Raven, get out! Someone just used a master key override on the front door." "Who is it?" she whispered, backing into the shadows of the study. I don't know. It's not Derek. He's at the station processing Ashton. It must be one of his partners. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood, heavy, deliberate. I know you're in here, a voice called out. It wasn't Derek, it was deeper, raspy. Raven recognized the voice. Sergeant Kowalski, Derek's right-hand man. She was trapped. The study had no other exit. The window was a 40-story drop. Derek called, Kowalski said, walking closer to the study. Said he got a security alert. Said the little bird might have come back to the nest. Raven gripped the gun. She couldn't shoot a cop, even a dirty one. That was a line she couldn't uncross. But she couldn't get caught. Not with the drive. Not while Ashton was sitting in a cell waiting for her. She looked around, frantically. Her eyes landed on the heavy bronze bust of Julius Caesar on the desk. Kowalski stepped into the doorway, his gun drawn. End of the line, sweetheart. Put your hands... Raven didn't wait. She shoved the heavy bookshelf with every ounce of strength she had. It tipped, groaning, and crashed down toward the doorway. Kowalski shouted, jumping back to avoid being crushed. In the cloud of dust and chaos, Raven sprinted, not toward the door, but toward the balcony. Stop! Kowalski roared, firing a shot. The bullet shattered a vase near her head. Raven burst onto the balcony. The wind whipped her hair. She looked at the neighboring balcony, 10 feet away. A terrifying jump for an athlete. A suicidal one for a woman with broken ribs. Raven, what are you doing? Silas screamed in her ear. Improvising, she gasped. She climbed the railing. The pain in her side was blinding, white-hot agony. She didn't look down at the streetlights far below. She looked at the railing across the gap. For Ashton. She leaped. For a second, she was weightless, suspended in the night sky over the city that wanted to eat her alive. She slammed into the opposite railing, her chest hitting the metal. The scream was torn from her throat, raw and animalistic. She slipped, her fingers scrabbling for purchase on the wet metal. No, she sobbed, dangling 40 stories up. But she didn't let go. She hauled herself up, gasping, crying, dragging her body over the railing onto the neighbor's terrace. She collapsed on the concrete, clutching the flash drive in her pocket. She was alive. Silas, she wheezed into the comms. Get the car around to the east exit. I'm coming down. The 4th precinct was a buzz of activity. It was 5 a.m., the hour when the drunks were being released, and the night shift was swapping with the morning crew. Ashton Blackthorne sat in Interrogation Room 1. He was handcuffed to the table. His suit was rumpled, but his posture was immaculate. He looked less like a prisoner, and more like a CEO conducting a performance review. Detective Derek Miller paced in front of him, slamming a file onto the table. It's over, Blackthorne, Derek sneered. His nose was taped, his wrist in a splint. We found the unregistered weapons in your estate. We have witnesses placing you at the scene of my assault. You're going away for 20 years. I'm going to dismantle your empire brick by brick. Ashton didn't blink. You seem nervous, Detective. Is your retirement fund secure? Derek leaned in, his face inches from Ashton's. My fund is fine. And your little girlfriend? The one you tried to play White Knight for? Kowalski just called. She broke into my place. He chased her off the balcony. She's probably a stain on the pavement by now. For the first time, Ashton's mask cracked. A flicker of genuine rage, dark and abyssal, ignited in his eyes. The chains rattled as his fist clenched. If you touched her, Ashton said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more threat than a scream, I will burn this city to the ground, with you inside it. Derek laughed. You're in handcuffs, tough guy. You can't do... The door to the interrogation room flew open. The police captain, a stern woman named Captain Reeves, stood there. But she wasn't looking at Ashton. She was looking at the television screen mounted in the corner of the room. Miller, she said, her voice icy, turn on the news. Derek frowned. Captain, I'm in the middle of a confession. Turn it on, she barked. Derek grabbed the remote and flicked on the monitor. The local news channel was breaking coverage. The headline banner was red and flashing. Police corruption exposed. The Miller Files. On the screen, a reporter was standing outside the precinct. Documents just released anonymously to every major news outlet, and the FBI allege a massive skimming operation run by Detective Derek Miller. The leak includes audio recordings, ledger photos, and a detailed log of evidence theft, totaling over $2 million. Derek's face went white. He staggered back. That's fake! It's a deep fake! Is it? The voice came from the hallway. Raven Fox stepped into the interrogation room viewing area. She was limping. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, and she looked exhausted. But she was holding her head high. Beside her stood 2 FBI agents. She looked through the one-way glass, though the door was open now. She looked straight at Derek. "I didn't steal your money, Derek," she said, her voice clear and cutting through the stunned silence of the precinct floor. "But I did steal your future." Derek lunged toward her. "You bitch!" Ashton moved. He didn't need a key. He stood up, snapping the metal loop of the handcuffs that had been weakened by the stress of the table leg he had been subtly working on for the last hour. No, he didn't need to break out. The captain drew her weapon. "Miller, stand down!" 2 officers tackled Derek before he could reach the door. He screamed, thrashing as they cuffed him with his own handcuffs. "I am the law!" Derek shrieked as they dragged him out. "You can't do this to me!" Ashton watched him go, then turned his gaze to the door where Raven stood. The captain looked at Ashton, then at the FBI agents. "Mr. Blackthorne," one of the agents said, "it seems the anonymous tipster also provided evidence that the weapons found at your estate were planted by Detective Miller. We are releasing you pending further investigation." The agent unlocked Ashton's cuffs. Ashton rubbed his wrists. He didn't thank the agents. He walked straight out of the room, ignoring the staring cops, and stopped in front of Raven. He looked at the dirt on her face, the way she favored her left side. "You jumped," he said. It wasn't a question. He had heard Derek. "I had to," Raven whispered. She was trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "You were in trouble." Ashton reached out. He didn't care about the cameras, the cops, or the FBI. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the grime on her cheek. "I told you," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't need saving." "Too bad," Raven smiled weakly, "because you got it anyway." Ashton let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Let's go home." 3 weeks later, the terrace of the Blackthorne estate overlooked the ocean. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. Raven sat on a lounge chair, a book in her lap. Her ribs were almost healed, leaving only a faint ache when she laughed too hard. Silas was down on the beach, failing miserably at surfing, while Cale watched him from the shore with a look of long-suffering patience. The glass door slid open. Ashton stepped out. He carried 2 glasses of champagne. He looked different these days. The tension that had defined his shoulders was gone. He still wore the suits. Old habits died hard, but he smiled more. "To the news," he said, handing her a glass. "Derek Miller was denied bail. The trial starts next month. He's looking at 30 years. Raven took the glass. "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy." She took a sip, the bubbles crisp on her tongue. She looked at Ashton. "So, the debt. Is it paid?" Ashton sat on the edge of her lounge chair. He looked out at the horizon. "You saved my life. I saved yours. Mathematically, we are even." "So I'm free to go?" Raven asked. The question hung in the air. Ashton turned to look at her. The sun caught the sharp angles of his face. "You have always been free to go, Raven. The gates are open. Silas has a trust fund now. You can go anywhere in the world." Raven looked at the open gate in the distance. Then she looked back at the man who had terrified her, challenged her, and protected her. "I was thinking about Paris," she said. Ashton's expression tightened imperceptibly. "Paris is nice this time of year." "But," Raven continued, setting her glass down. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred, interlaced with hers. "I hear Paris is boring without a partner in crime." Ashton looked at their joined hands. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. The kind of smile that promised trouble and paradise in equal measure. "I have business in Paris," he said softly. "I bet you do," Raven smirked. "Are you going to make me steal the Eiffel Tower?" "No." Ashton leaned in, his lips inches from hers. "I already have the only thing worth stealing." He kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, violent kiss of a movie climax. It was a promise, a seal on a contract that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the soul. When they pulled apart, Raven rested her head on his shoulder. "Wrong number," she whispered. "Right answer," Ashton replied. Below them, the waves crashed against the shore, washing away the past, leaving the future wide open and waiting. And that is the story of how a single typo changed 2 lives forever. From a broken rib to a healed heart, Raven and Ashton proved that sometimes the darkest paths lead to the brightest destinations. If you enjoyed this twisty, dramatic romance, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. What did you think of Raven's Jump? Would you have risked it all for the villain? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a new thriller coming next week that involves a runaway bride and a hitman, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.